Hey everybody, I am back with a new movie review. This week, uh, uh, it's gonna be something out of the box, something I have not seen before, but it was fun. It was a fun watch. But before I continue on, I'd like to express a huge thank you out there to those who've been watching my recent video about how I would fix the Star Wars sequel trilogy, and it's getting like a heck of a lot of views. And I'd like to express like a huge thank you to you guys, because like I said, that was just me just coming up with ideas in the last couple of days when I was came up with the idea for the video. And honestly, as a Star Wars fan, I did have my criticisms for the sequel trilogy and how it kind of just spun off into just an highs and lows of quality and wasn't consistent. And I just want to talk about a video where it's like how I can make those consistent, so whatever carries on in the future all balances out, instead of trying to fix the mistakes of the past and make everything make sense, instead of just taking your time in the first place and have some measure of ducks in a row and a blueprint, so that way you don't just flip flop the way you've been doing. Anyway, but anyway, follow me on links in the description below. If you want to further support the channel, you can check out my Patreon. Follow me on my YouTube channel and my Twitch as I go live, almost every day. The links are in the description below. So today I'll be covering, to carry on to the theme of the month, talking about family and or food, and or Native American type of stories for the month of November for Thanksgiving. Today I'll be, it's a food centered thing, is Julie and Julia, starring Meryl Streep and Amy Adams. Now this is pretty much based off of Julie Powell's story, where it's pretty much like a biopic-ish in a way, where around 2002, where this young woman who worked at a what do you call it, Lower Manhattan Development Corporation, a call center. It was literally a year after the events of 9/11, where she helping she answered phone calls to help victims and families after the attacks, with trying to explain the plans of rebuilding the World Trade Center, all that other stuff. But I don't know. This right now is kind of like a memorial site, so not sure how much that entire organization end up helping in the long run. But just all I see is just from the movie, just dealing with like grieving families and friends. But anyway, this kind of dealing with all that stuff day in and day out, it becomes like just depressing. Working in a cubicle is already kind of boring as it is, but add on top of dealing with grieving families a year after that tragedy, it took a toll. So she ends up coming up with an idea of making doing this task, essentially, where she looks up to Julia Childs in a way. It's kind of like an inspiration, where she decides to cook every recipe in Julia Child's cooking, French cooking, mastering the art of French cooking. That's what it's called, and cooking every recipe in the book and blogging about it. So before I continue, this was directed and is ultimately it turned into a book from this time in Julie's life. So this is directed by Nora Ephron, based on the book My Life in France by Julia Child and Alex Prudhomme, and Julia by Julie Powell. So it'll be going back and forth between the 1950s with Julia Child and present day 2002 for Julie Powell. So Meryl Streep plays Julia Childs, and of course she does a phenomenal job. Of course, in the top two, Meryl Streep and Amy Adams were phenomenal in this. Honestly, great performances. But Meryl Streep, you look up Julia Child and the way her mannerisms and the way she talk, she really embodied that character down to the way she talks. Like, I'm Julia Child, mastering the art of French cooking. Stanley Tucci as Paul Child, Julia's husband. Chris Messina as Eric Powell, Julie's husband. Linda Iman as Simone Black, Simca, who helped co-wrote the French cooking book. Helen Carey as Lucette Bertholli, who also co-authored the French cooking book. Did not know this, but Jane Lynch was in this film as Dorothy Dean Cousins as Julie's sister. So those are the major players. So instead of like just going back and forth, I'll just stick with one timeline first, then go to the present day. So in the 1950s, it was still like Julie's Julia Child's husband works in the government, and this is like not too long, getting towards the end of World War II, just about coming out of it, essentially, or just dealing with the aftermath. And matter of fact, there are some parallels between what is going on with Julia Child's life and with Julie Powell's life, where both coming out of a horrific tragedy and trying to find a way in life, like something that they want to do, instead of submitting to the mundane of what could have been, and just carving out a slice of life is something that they enjoy doing, and both finding cooking as a way to cater to that creativity and joy in a mundane life. And I honestly, as somebody who don't have that same love for like cooking like something like Gordon Ramsay or anything like that, because there's some level of dedication and ego and A-type personality involved with that kind of stuff. You really want to drive that love home. That's a whole level of discipline that you might not realize. My cousin went to a cooking school, and she's a great cook. But matter of fact, I should like talk to her. Next time I talk to her, I gotta ask, what was it like? Because I can imagine the level of discipline required in order to be a professional cook is next level. It's not for the faint of heart. You can get some enjoyment out of it, but it takes a whole nother level of dedication. But uh uh uh, uh, uh Julia Child's husband was stationed in France, in Paris. So while he's working, she, you know, uh, she was like, doing something with hats or something like that. It's like a job, something to do, but she wasn't getting enjoyment out of it. But then, uh, her husband asked, like, "What do you like doing?" She was like, "Eating." But then they, spiraled into uh, going to Le Cordon Bleu and learning how to cook. Now, I like watching cooking shows. It's so engaging, and there's art behind it, but there's also a level of science to it too. And if you watch my review of the TV show or the anime Food Wars, there's a lot involved, and it's just the like the discipline and like the learning the craft is so much involved. Where like Wolfgang Puck, who is a renowned chef, helped Jon Favreau when he was like researching and trying to learn the art of cooking for his role in that movie Chef, which I think next year we'll do like a review for that movie. He Wolfgang Puck, says like, "Oh, you're a pretty good cook," and he's like, "Yeah, sure." And he's like, "Okay, make me an omelet." And it's like, and just like in the pilot episode, or not the pilot episode, but the second episode of Food Wars, start off with like the basics for like newcomers, where the god tongue, I forgot her freaking name, but she asked people, "Okay, make make me something with eggs." And it's like, okay, because it's like 1,000 different ways of cooking an egg. And with the whole omelet thing with Wolfgang Puck, with Jon Favreau, he like tasted it, threw it in the trash, make it again. And then with Soma Yukihira from Food Wars, like he made this like incredible dish from just using eggs as the theme. So it's just like, sure, there's 1,000 different ways you can prepare an egg, but with a cooking teacher, there I guess it's like a precise way. Even if you're doing like an omelet, you can't just, anybody can like learn how to make an omelet, but it's a difference between how your mama might cook an omelet for you and how a professional chef will cook an omelet for you. So you can get a sense of the different qualities of the way they prepare it is of leaps and bounds. It's kind of like somebody who runs track in high school is far different than somebody who runs track at the Olympics. Both can be considered fast, but one only has like a different level of discipline and teaching and involved when it comes to that similar theme of the skill set, but one has better skill. Just to point it out. So, we see Julia Childs. She pretty much the only woman in the class being taught by, because she had to change classes because she didn't want to go to the first class she went to, she thought was very rudimentary. She wanted to go to like where the experts will teach you, because it's like it's kind of like a bunch of old ladies, like, like learning how to cook at a very mundane type of teacher. Like, no, I'm not being challenged enough. And you know what that means. It's like, if you, it's like somebody who's a fifth grader and you're in like a third grade class, you will feel like you're not being challenged enough. Yeah. It's like, it's not for me. You gotta go to a different class. Your brain needs to be challenged. It's kind of like a muscle. A brain is a muscle. It needs stress in order to get what it needs. So Julia ends up going to a more advanced class where, of course, she struggles at first, but she accepted the challenge from this Chef Boyardee looking dude. And eventually going to this decadent party with her husband, she ends up meeting what would be her two co-writers to a French cookbook they will eventually collaborate on. Simone and Lucette. And Lucette got under my skin, where she is just a lazybout and she know what she was doing. The fact that eventually these three started working together to start teaching a class themselves after, Julia Childs, took her test and passed her exam after the second time, because unfortunately her instructor wasn't the one who was giving her a test, which should have been the one to do it. It was the other lady who, gave her grief that Julia mentions. She likes pretty much everybody, but this one particular woman is the one that got on her nerves so much, where she just like has a disdain for her. But she needs, I guess she's kind of like the principal or something. I'm not sure what, position she had at that school, but she was unnecessarily antagonistic towards her. This had to be, based on real life situations from historical records with Julia Child. But it's just like, she was given like a test where it's like, okay, break down the ingredients in that was needed to make this particular food, which I imagine that will be a legit test for somebody learning at culinary school. But she failed at first, but she ended up passing after taking it again. So these three friends started to work teaching cooking for students. But Lucette always making up excuses, leaving halfway through the class half the time. And it's like, lady, do you have any, do you even like, because Simone and Julia really lives this life. They love cooking and teaching, all that stuff. You, like, are you just right on their coattails, seeing like, I don't know, like, you think this is like a hobby for them, because you're treating it like this ain't, still serious business. Because my mentor, when it comes to acting, because she's kind of like a drill instructor, honestly, but I have so much respect for her, where she points out to me that she wants the people she brings on, they, better understand this is still a business as well as a craft. This is not something like you're just doing it because you think it's like treating like, oh, it's just like any other job, or it's like, oh, it's like a hobby, or just very blasé about it, but and not treating it with the seriousness that it deserves. People work many years at this, similar to cooking, where you just cannot treat it just like a so-so thing. that's very disingenuous and disrespectful. So you got to give this, you got to be serious about this. And Lucette, if it was my mentor, she would have been out. She does not care about your feelings. She would have told Lucette, probably pulled her aside, probably want to embarrass her, but it's like, I don't want you coming back. You clearly not treating it seriously. We're about this, okay? Like, we went to school for this. We it's hard to get into this kind of field, and it's a grind, and you're, not taking it seriously. You got to be out. As a matter of fact, as the three was coming up with the idea for the mastering art of French cooking, trying to, make a French cooking book for American housewives, Simone and Julia is like, okay, we're going to have to tell her she got to be off. We'll give her a percentage because she still was, started this with us. So we'll give her a percentage. And then she come up one day, because Julia seems like the kind of person like doesn't really care. She'll tell you in a nice way, but she'll tell you like, look, you got to go. You ain't really, been a part of this. You ain't dedicated to this, but we'll give you some percentage of royalties. This ain't going to be as big as my or Simone's. And, of course, Simone's like, we'll get your name will be on the book, but it's going to be in small font. So it's like, Julia's like, no. And she was fair. It was like, no. She'll get the same size of font as as we will. She'll get her royalties, but it ain't going to be as big as ours. So I thought that was at least fair. Because you started with a business with them, even though you wasn't participating as you probably should have been, but you still contributed. So we'll give you your still fair share. There's still fair. But then she started making up excuses like, oh, my husband and I are getting divorced, and that's why I was leaving. I was like, you couldn't tell your friends early on. Give them so they can try to work around your schedule or something like that. So, because you wasn't doing them that level of courtesy, so like why would they need to give you that level of courtesy back? Because from their point of view, you was making excuses. You were running from your responsibilities in a sense. I think Julia, what she did was appropriate. That was an appropriate thing because but that lady, it's like you wasn't understanding, like you was not pulling your weight at all, and that wasn't fair to them. Anyway, and then Paul was getting summoned back to the States to talk with his superiors, because apparently they suspect him of doing something un-American. It's never really delved into here. The specifics, I imagine that is, I'm pretty sure, it was probably would have been redacted at the time, but I'm pretty sure it's, open to the general public nowadays. But I don't know what specific they thought he was doing that was deemed un-American. They think he was a traitor to his country or selling secrets. Don't know, but he was cleared, so I guess they suspected the wrong person. But he did have to move not in Paris, but still in France territory. But it was still a long ways, so she couldn't really collaborate with her friends like she easily could. But they were still working hard of building this cookbook. But because it was so much involved, and especially trying to translate from French to English, the book was way too long. And the initial publisher they went to, what was it? Houghton Mifflin. Thought it was too long. They couldn't go with it, which was like a setback. And it comes, and of course, we've all been there when trying to achieve something. There's always a level of setback. There's always are, but it's how you pivot and get up is what matters. You didn't let this, Julia didn't let this get to her, even though it was a disappointment. So, but this other publishing company, Alfred A. Knopf, could be mispronouncing that a bit. One of the ladies there tried one of her recipes, and was she thought it was immaculate. She got a hold of her, but they also worked on the name because the name was kind of like, wasn't catchy in a way, I guess. So they end up naming it what it is, what we know to be now as the In Mastering the Art of French Cooking. And now that they, Julia Childs and her husband moved back to America, and I think Massachusetts, and living like a nice, life together. And then of course celebrate when the cookbook finally came out, and it all worked out. There was like a bit of strife when Julia's sister came to visit, and ends up meeting a guy at one of the parties that they went to, ends up getting married, and of course eventually conceived a child of their own. And this kind of, I don't think it really was delved too much into, but I guess it's left for you to infer, because I'm pretty sure historical records. I'm not sure if Julia Childs eventually had a kid of her own, but maybe they couldn't, and that was like something that seems to bother her, because she was happy for her sister, but she ended up weeping a bit because like she had never had like a, I guess, did she? Yeah, I don't think Julia Childs ever had a kid of her own. That is uh very sad. Hmm. Oof. Uh. Hmm. Let me check something. Uh. Did, because I don't think she did. Nope. Uh. Julia never had kids, although Julia did feel the absence of children and grandchildren. Her career in Paul helped her look past that. It's sad. And I guess surrogates, like Paul, you know, uh, I guess adoption wasn't a thing they believed in, but I don't know. It's like this might sound messed up, but you know, I would have if I was Julia. I was like a just to have like a legacy at least for her husband's sake. They love each other clearly from this film, and more than likely historical records. I would have like uh do the Abraham thing and just like okay, you know, find a nice, woman, trustworthy woman, and like, okay, birth a kid, you know, or I don't know, because, insemination probably was not a thing back in the 50s. It wasn't invented yet. So it's just like, I don't know, just to carry on the child's legacy. But of course, she has, nieces and nephews, and yeah, she'll still have like people in the Julia Child's familial family, but something for her own body, like it's just like something that was probably obviously missed, but eventually got passed. So anyway, now going to present day with Julie, and like I said, she living like a Monday life in a job, moving into an apartment with her husband. Um, what's his name? Uh, Eric. Uh, uh, she eventually decides, okay, because she found like this cookbook of Julia Child's, and she just becomes obsessed. And now we all have that one person we really look up to and strive in the same field as they do, or just see ourselves through them, which I can see. I just think she eventually have became, like this woman. This woman that has, at least by this time, would still be alive, but in her 90s in 2002, because her husband would have died in 1994. So, uh, she made this woman like all about her life. Like it's just like Julia Child's consumed Julie's life pretty much. Because yeah, it's like this in terms of acting, especially voice acting. I have at least a good few of actors who are in that realm I look up to and follow greatly and in their footsteps and everything like that. Sure. But I think my biggest issue, now this is like a biopic essentially, so this party did happen. Don't know how much of it's played up for the movie, but I imagine Julie was to a degree obsessed with Julia Childs, where it started to, eventually hamper her relationship a bit. But at first, her husband's like all super supportive, just like Paul was super supportive of his wife. So she built a blog and went with this task of cooking for a year, cooking every recipe in Julia Child's book every day. Now, I don't know how many recipes are in this book to warrant 365 days. It's like, uh, because it's like 2 volumes, so I guess it would be significant. God, how many recipes though? It was 726 pages in these 2 volumes. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure, this should be a significant amount to warrant a year to, prepare a meal every day for 365 days. And of course, according to her mom, like over here on the phone, where it's like, oh, you never really finished anything you started, blah, blah, blah. So this is something that is also driving her. It's like, I gotta finish what I started. And of course, things, like she started to garner a bit of fans online. And she, write these little blog posts and everything like that, which I think is a little bit too, a little bit too TMI. But I guess it depends on the person writing it and how comfortable you are of revealing your personal stuff into the blog. But like with me, like when I make these videos, it's like I drop in some nuggets of personal stuff here and there, but I'm not gonna tell you guys every little thing because it's not, everybody's business. And I'm pretty sure you feel like it's not like the Red Table Talk. I don't need to know Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith's intimate stuff, entanglements. There's a certain degree of I don't want to know that, and I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people who feel that way. Like, I don't need to know all that stuff. Just enough where you feel, relatable, like you're a person. But like I thought there's like a cool thing she came up with her husband. It's like, yeah, I can break away from the monotony through cooking. I can, stretch my creative juices a bit by cooking all these, foods, some complicated, some less complicated. And, I kind of wish, since you're doing this for a year, I would like to see the passage of time a little bit. It's always seemed like it's stuck in spring and summer or something, or at least summertime, because they live in New York in this apartment. And I'm thinking like, okay, how can I even tell? I think that's the biggest like misstep that I'm gleaming from the film. How can I know it's been a year when I don't even see seasons change? And I don't see like, her in like a cute little Halloween costume while she's still preparing, different desserts for Halloween or something like that. It's like, or especially when Thanksgiving rolls around, you would think, okay, this is your time where you can actually, mix in some Julia Child's dishes into the main course of the Thanksgiving meal. Reflect that a bit. All I feel as I'm watching this is like we're perpetually stuck in summertime in that same year. Anyway, so when her blog and online footprints really starting to pick up a fan base, she eventually gets a call about some reporter who wants to interview her or send somebody, it's like a critic or reviewer or something like that, to come and see and try her foods and interview her. But because, and this is another thing that's kind of dumb in my opinion, I'm pretty sure is what probably actually happened back then, but it's still kind of dumb, where it was pouring rain and they had to cancel at the last minute because the person they was going to send, like a critic or something like that, is like elderly, and she really did not want to come out, which is understandable. But you could have called ahead of time to let them know, like, okay, the rain doesn't seem like it's going to let up, and the person might, before, because because it seems very, not courteous to call hours ahead to let them know, hey, I'm pretty sure you're in the middle of cooking. I just want to let you know before, because she literally is prepping everything ready for this person. And you just call, it's like, oh, it's not going to happen. That seems, and the time is approaching. You're not being respectful of this person's time. And now, she's feeling crummy. And she's already wasn't satisfied how the dish she was planning on cooking was turning out anyway. So it's kind of adds insult to injury. But like, whoever was that person who's supposed to be doing the interview was not very considerate of this person's time. Should have called, hours ahead when the weather wasn't letting up, so that person can okay, I can just ease up, cancel a couple of, don't have to worry about prepping anything else beyond this point because, no need for me to do all this rigmarole. So she can kind of chill out a bit because she's already stressing. But then this ends up in an argument between Julie and her husband, because she at this point thinking oh, it's all about Julia Childs, and it's she's not very considerate of her husband's feelings and what he thinks, and it kind of was the argument. The argument seems oh, yeah, it was an argument, but he ended up leaving out, going to his office job to just chill out there, because I guess he's kind of a journalist for archaeology or something like that. There's a lot of archaeology stuff in his office, but it's just did the argument was worth you going all the way to your job to rest or whatever? It's it wasn't a big massive blow up that warrants somebody leaving the house. Sure, you could have gone, if it was going to be temporary, you could have had him go to a local bar or something like that, or go to one of his friends' house to chill for a minute, to until things cool down, then go back home. You make it seem like somebody was beating the other or something like that, it's that level. It wasn't really a big argument. They was barely even yelling, as a matter of fact. So that scene entirely, the level it required didn't justify the end result. If you wanted somebody to storm out, that argument better blow the heck up. That's all I'm saying. But of course, things cool down. They end up, meeting up after she stopped at the market to pick up some ingredients. They end up, bumping into each other in front of the apartment. And, things pick back up again for her. She continued and finished her task, and after the interview and people calling her about hey, we want to do a movie deal with you. We want to other people who want to bring you on to the Today Show and all this other stuff, wants to talk with Julie about the blog and everything like that. Well, then one of the people brought what she did to Julia Childs, who at this time would have been in her 90s, and she left a bad review on what Julie did, which honestly was the biggest twist for me watching this film, where it's wow, she did not care for it. And it did break Julie's heart, because she idolized this woman, and I can't even imagine how would it be where it wasn't really explicit on how what Julia Child's exact words were, because they wasn't they wasn't explicit with it, because she just inferred like, oh, Julia Childs hated my book, or hated what I did, or I assume it was like a book, whatever. It hated my book, and she just took it that way. Well, what you envision her quote unquote hating could have just been like, I don't know, and she would have been 90, so it's like, of course, elderly people can just say whatever they feel like, and people just accept it. But she could have said like, what she did with this George Bush or whatever, I don't know, or what she did with this particular turkey or whatever, didn't do this in this particular way, or she kind of, lacked here or excelled there or whatever. Because often people, take criticism, differently from others. Because this could have been helpful criticism and not just full blown hate. Because Julia Childs don't know you like that, and she would have probably thought it was admirable. Given what we've seen with Julia Child's life, she seems like a very nice lady. Now, of course, there are other stuff that you look back on might not seem, because she grew up in a different era. She was a bit proponent, like a front runner of, like, during the AIDS epidemic. She was a big, protester on, like, when it comes to like AIDS safety and people who were inflicted by that. She, fought for them. But there's other stuff you look up, you might not say like, and that's not cool. But similar to how Julie Powell is, because Julie Powell died, 2018, 17, something like that. From because it's kind of run. This woman is literally like, there's some parallels between, even in real life, it seem like some parallels between the two. Julia Childs died of kidney failure at 90, while I think Julie died with cardiac failure or something like that. So both health concerns. But in Julie's life, she tweeted some not nice things, depending on your point of view. Not going to express it here. I'm pretty sure you can look it up. But it's just like, people are complicated. Which people you kind of look up to probably has some things you, might not agree with, but doesn't discount what contributions she done to life for the betterment of people. But thanks to her husband, like, because both of these ladies' husbands stuck it out with them. This is like an ideal couples where they have, their own personal issues that they had to overcome, but they managed to stick it out, because that's the whole thing. Marriage takes work. There's going to be some lows that you have to power through to make it work. You don't quit because somebody made you sad one day, or what the significant other kind of disappointed you on, because eventually you will get over it. That's life. And these two couples power through their personal issues and come out on the other end stronger for it. What Eric did for Julie was tell her that that you got to understand, the difference between the Julia Childs in your head and the Julia Childs for real. You accomplished something that you should be proud of yourself, irregardless of what anybody else thinks. You accomplished something, and that, is more than you can say about most other people. And that is probably the key thing that I really latched on to, that kind of sums it up for both Julie and Julia, where you managed to accomplish something that you yourselves should be proud of, irregardless of anybody else's opinion. Because most people can just go through their 9-to-5 grind, day in, day out, not accomplish anything. But you, despite whether success or failure, you got out there, put yourself out there, and still tried. And this is one of my own kind of personal quotes. I usually do quotes on my TikTok every now and again, but this is one of my personal quotes that I say to myself. It's better to try and fail than to live with regret. That is something, the kind of words that I'm pretty sure I came, somebody kind of inspired that quote from that I kind of formulate into words for myself. But it's just how I phrase it. It's better to try and fail than live with regret. And that's how I end up living, how I live life. Because, yeah, I'm not going to get it right all the time. None of us will. But I still respect those who get out there, because the greatest fear is not knowing what could have been. You do not want to live your entire life, well into your elderly years, wondering like what could have been, and because that'll be even more depressing. But anyway, Julie and Eric go to the Smithsonian to see like the exhibit for Julia Childs and everything like that, because they reconstructed her kitchen exactly. And then for some reason, I would say there was a reason, because there's a whole thing with butter and everything like that early on in the movie. She left butter on below a picture of Julia Childs next to the exhibit, and it's like, freaking weirdo. It's like, okay, I guess it's like a cute thing to kind of like bring it back, but it's kind of like somebody had to clean that up, because that butter's gonna melt and leave ants and everything like that. I'm just thinking about that. It's like that whole entire time. It's like, don't leave that there, you weirdo. And you ever been to a museum? There's always security there, and it's like, miss, please take that off. Don't, because like I'm doing like a how it should have ended in my head. It's like, lady, come back here and take that with you. What the heck is wrong with you? But anyway, that was Julie and Julia. It's a good movie. It's a really good movie. Not one of my favorite type of movies dealing with cooking and everything like that, but it's a nice little biopic. You get to learn a little bit about these two women who contributed something in the world of cooking for everybody, and became like legends in their own right. But they all have their own personal issues in life that you look up, you probably not would agree with. But it's just like, it's like anybody. We all got somebody we look up to in terms of the profession that we're in. It's like, there's I look up to, in terms of voice acting, like I look up to people like Tara Strong and Steve Bloom and Phil Lamar, and Dan Green, Eric Stewart. And there's some stuff in their personal lives that I don't 100% agree with, and some like I do agree with them on. But people are complicated. You're not always going to agree, as long as they don't turn out to be complete monsters like somebody like, Diddy or anything like that we're seeing as of late, then, you can still hold on to that part, that you envision in your mind about the person you look up to and that kind of inspired you to do what you do. Just hope for the best that you done enough good in your life that, you can look back on and say, like, I didn't get it all right, but I can sleep well knowing that I wasn't a complete D-head, Anyway, I will see you guys in a few minutes. I got another movie I want to review with you guys, and it's also centered around cooking. And this one's a fun one. But leave a comment below. Let me know what you think of Julie and Julia. If you've seen this movie before, let me know what you think. But if you haven't, I highly recommend it. Because it's actually a fun movie. I think Amy Adams and Meryl Streep did their thing here. It was a great performance from these two ladies. Anyway, I'll see you guys soon. Take care.